The background of the problem is, in most cases, all of them that I'm familiar with, but I've seen it in a couple other places, found right after the introduction of the study. Chapter 1 starts out with an introduction and then goes into the background of the problem. This background of the problem information is a high-level view of the problem. Think about a problem that perhaps deals with nursing burnout, nursing turnover, the big problem that perhaps has transitioned over the last 10 or 15 years. What have been some of the causes of that? What's been some of the severities of the problem? It's the high view. It's not really getting focused on one hospital or even in one portion of healthcare, but it could be a holistic point of view that gives an insight into the ideas about what you see as problems related to nursing turnover. Could be something that deals in education. Perhaps you work in a K through 12 setting and you are starting to look at why students are not as successful as they should be. Perhaps part of the overview is that the No Child Left Behind policy that was started roughly in 2003, 2004 area was a situation that was at the time a realization that K through 12 education needed to be changed. And so there's a little history, there's a high level behind it. And you may say that there's been some successes, but to date there still are some opportunities for improvement that were never achieved, if you will, as far as student success. And so therefore it sets the high level view and gives somewhat of an introduction to the problem that you're going to address today. It suggests some trending information. You may be given information on how the No Child Left Behind policy was started during the George Bush era when he was the president and what it was designed to do, and then show some improvements, but then also show how it failed to meet all the goals. And so you're showing some trending information, some insights along the way. Again, you're writing the background of the problem just at a high level view. Some of this might be also history related in the sense that you may be providing some information about how K through 12 schools have been suffering for many years, particularly in cities where poverty is high. And so you may show some history on what's changed and what's caused that to happen from your perspective. And you would give some citations to help support that. The background of the problem, think of it as the first opportunity to show some severity of the problem. Here, if it's about nursing turnover, you might show the severity of how it's increased in time, perhaps in the year 2000, 2010, 2012, 2014. You might show how it's increased because you have statistics that support that. You have high turnover rates that have been produced. Perhaps it's the No Child Left Behind policy, and you can see that still there is a certain number of students that are not getting the education they need, and the severity of the problem can be that some students, if they don't get a high school diploma, they end up being in poverty, or they end up being situations where they have broken families and they're single parent homes, and therefore it affects their children. It's a spiral that needs fixing and needs help, and so forth. We can see the severity of the problem as it's transpired to what it's become today. The background of the problem is a place where it suggests your knowledge of your related research and published content. Here we're not asking you to cite authors of books. We're asking you to look at providing real-time, real information that's produced that shows statistical analysis, perhaps citations from things related to or published from the Census Bureau, other government publications. Perhaps it's research articles that you have found that are related to your research that help suggest what the problem was and how it came to be. Oftentimes, the background of the problem suggests unanswered questions by others. We don't know exactly why everything didn't work with the No Child Left Behind policy. We don't know exactly why there's still high turnover in nurses in certain communities, like perhaps the trauma centers. We may have found that there's been research, but yet there's unanswered questions on why things continue to occur. For example, in the United States, high business failure rates for new businesses, it's about 50% in the first 2 years. This has happened for over 50 years. There's unanswered questions on why this hasn't changed. So you can see on how building the case, if you will, giving the introduction that relates to this situation provides for some unanswered questions, of which your dissertation then will help provide answers. It provides for the evidence of how the problem is dissertation worthy. A dissertation should be significant and substantial. It should offer some sort of data that produces information that people will use to lessen the problem. So as you build this background of the problem section, you are actually giving some evidence to suggest that your dissertation is needed, that there are these unanswered questions. There are still concerns with children not graduating. There's still concerns with nurses who are turning over at high levels. There's a need for your dissertation, and your dissertation can help produce information that may be used by others later. The background of the problem gives relevant facts. Here you want to use information that shows that severity by quoting and using information from government-produced information if it's available, recent research studies. Give information that shows that what you're providing is relevant. It's not just general information as you might get from an author of a book, but it's more about relevant facts. The background of the problem, if somebody reads that section alone, should suggest the need for your research. They should be able to read that section and say, yep, there's been a problem, there's still a problem. We need to do something about it. If you can answer those kinds of questions on your own as you review your own work and say, gee, does this provide that sort of information on what the problem was, how it came to be, and that there's still need for more research, then you know you're onto something. Consider this section as a teaser that leads into the problem statement, that this section provides that quick background information, provides some severity of the problem, and it helps the reader to move along from what's happened in the past, and then the problem statement is going to provide what the situation is today. So think of these two sections that they go together. First, the background of the problem shows some information, some insights substantiated with some facts that shows how the problem came to be at a very high level, and then the problem statement goes into showing what the general problem literally is today and where it is a problem at, and that would be where your research is being done. This content is taken from, but it's not a review of the literature. I've heard a few people say, well, I'll just write the literature review. I'll take a couple of sections out of there and that'll be the background of the problem. That's not the case. The literature review is a broad, robust view of everything that's going on with the variables or the themes of your research or the experiences that people are dealing with. Here, we're just talking about the background of the problem. Yes, there might be some information that's duplicated from this section into the literature review and perhaps from the literature review brought into this section. That's common because there are sections of the proposal and dissertation that get repeated. But the focus here is background of the problem, not related to all the literature review. This section I find is usually 2 to 4 pages. If you have less than 2 pages, perhaps you're not giving enough details on that history or the trends on how that problem came to be. And if you're over 4 pages, perhaps you are a little verbose or you're not as focused as you could be otherwise. Take a look at how many pages you have. I'm not saying that you can't have 6, but in general, 2 to 4 pages is more than enough to provide that information, that teaser, and enough supporting information for one to realize that there's a problem. Here's some examples from 3 of my mentees. I'm only going to share 3 examples because this section is not as detailed or as regular as other sections. I've taken a few sentences from my mentees in the examples that I'm going to provide you that they've given me consent for, just to help show you how others have related their information in this section. So the first example from Dr. Maria Puente in her dissertation, Selling Lived Experiences of Domestic Property and Casualty Insurance Leaders, is as such, where she shared, although organizational leaders spend large amounts of time and money to manage the sales force, few leaders focus on how the sales force needs to change over the life cycle of a product or business. Here, the most important point is that she goes on to say, few leaders focus on how the sales force needs to change over the life cycle of the product or business. That's what her dissertation is addressing, the need for leaders to focus differently. She also shared in another part of the background of the problem, over the past 20 years, a crucial transformation has occurred in the selling functions of organizations. Here she's alluding to a little bit of history also a little bit perhaps of trending that's saying over the past 20 years something's happened. And so this is a very appropriate type of statement to make in this section. Now, Dr. Joe Hagee, in the second example, in his dissertation titled Influence of Religion and Religiosity on Leadership Practices in the Workplace, a Quantitative Correlation Study, in his award-winning quantitative study, he shared this information. Early in the 21st century, researchers intensified their study of the effects of spirituality in the workplace, but without a specific focus on religion. His dissertation has specific focus on religion. So you can see how he's leading in. He's kind of teasing along the way, if you will, setting a foundation and then going to actually serve that foundation with his own work. In another section in this heading, he went on to say the large majority of studies about leadership have taken place in the industrialized world, but research in the business domain is scarce on leadership and followership models in societies and cultures that are highly influenced by religion. His study was done in Lebanon, and therefore his study was done in an area that was highly influenced by religion. So he has laid the groundwork here and gave some insights into the background of the problem and has suggested on how his situation is going to be relevant. Now, Dr. Susan Kristiniak, and the third and final example I'll share with you in this lesson, in her study titled Exploring the Experiences of Complementary Therapy Nurses, a Qualitative Phenomenological Study, she goes on in this section of the background of the problem to relate the correlation of nursing satisfaction to quality and safe care delivery has prompted the assessment of nursing satisfaction by healthcare. What she's been able to show here is that there's this correlation and how there's this need for assessment. Her study happens to be an assessment of nursing satisfaction in healthcare leadership. She went on with this sentence: the need for healthcare providers to serve their community with the knowledge of these treatment options is critical in the delivery of safe, effective, and quality care. Recalling from her title of the dissertation, it's about complementary therapies that our nurses are using. And so therefore, she's sharing some information here on how this information will help to provide greater safe, effective, and quality care to this section. Again, roughly 2 to 4 pages, and you have yourself the background of the problem.